So do you guys mind just going ahead and I grabbed a clip from your bios online, but could you just give a breakdown of like sort of your fields, your expertise? Mike, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Mike Woods. I was executive creative director at the VFX studio Framestore for 15 years. The last 3 of those years, we started Framestore's VR studio and just had the amazing early head start of making a whole lot of VR very quickly and learned a lot and are proud of about 25% of what we did, and 75% is what you'd expect. But we did these projects under absurdly pressured situations because big...
Never mind. Go ahead.
There was no luxury of R&D periods or working out what worked and what didn't work, and yet we still had huge brands and famous IP needing their projects delivered in time. So brilliant learning curve, found out what I really enjoyed doing and what I didn't particularly enjoy doing, and then broke from Framestore last year to start my own thing in the VR
and that gets
space.
Launched next year, right?
Hopefully in the next few months we'll start to be able to show what we've been doing for a year.
So Mike sent me a couple of clips, and unfortunately I could only choose one. I grabbed this from his Facebook. And what we're going to show is Game of Thrones. How old is that you did that?
We had it finished in 2013, and it was, as far as we know, the first branded IP VR thing. So there was no one to ask how to do it, and yeah, it was pretty intense.
So we picked this as an example because it's a good inkling to where Mike is taking VR, but he'll talk a little bit more of like where he is now. He just doesn't have, there's no living examples yet of it.
What bit are you showing?
Well, let's see.
Wow, that seems so dated.
I know, it seems really long ago. But what it's good at is just starting, like that casing is just a jumping off point for you, right? Like, can you talk a little bit where you're taking that?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I was both naive and really hopeful in the thinking it was just like a whole new, anything goes, anything would work. And if you saw an interview with me with another project a year and a half down the line, I wouldn't be quite so excited, where we've just hit so many dead ends about what we feel VR is very good at, but all the thing that, the line at the end there about saying it translates to Hollywood directors coming in and doing it is not right. That's one thing that we learned.
Is that why you quit your job and now you're like, no one else will do it?
Couldn't stand the Hollywood directors anymore.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's not true. That's not true. Yeah. But all the things that we just thought it would lend itself towards as a tool and a medium, I'm not even sure it's a medium anymore. It's something else. But the thing about that project in particular was that because it was the first of its kind, we knew we were going to get a load of attention, and we got loads of attention, and we learnt a lot about thinking about rendering in 4K, and the headsets have come on to such a degree now that old DK1, it's just, even without any kind of positional tracking or anything, I mean, it feels sort of archaic to talk about now, but that was our focus on technology, of just making it look good enough for Dan and David that run the show, that they were checking it out and they wanted it to look like Castle Black and Game of Thrones world. So the pressure was on visual fidelity and visual targets. And then almost as an afterthought towards the end, it was like, it'll be fun if we just make it freezing cold. And the guys, we had the original plans of the original Castle Black elevator, so we built 5 of them to scale. So you are Jon Snow as you go up in that elevator. And everything's sort of 1-to-1 ratio, but then a speaker without a speaker, so a butt kicker under the floor that's being fed the audio track, so that as you're going up 700 feet, the floor is rattling. 2 really simple fans that we bought from Best Buy, one above us, so as you're going up, the air's coming down, and then as you're getting closer to the edge of being shot at by wildlings, the fan in front of you is getting more powerful, and then playing around with smell machines. And the thing that occurred to us that we completely didn't appreciate was that to go and do that, you had to stand in a line for 90 minutes with all the other Game of Thrones fans. You had to go through the whole show. You had to, you look at costumes. You'd sit on the Iron Throne. You'd be, and the music's booming everywhere. You're drinking Lannister beer. Yeah. It's a total Game of Thrones experience. So by the time you come to our elevators, we've won. Right. You're flipped. Right. You're open, and you're ready for that to be way more impactful than if we showed someone in the office, just like come in the office, a sort of nice-looking New York apartment loft, come in the office, do it, just there. No impact. Well, impact for there's
No
a
setup,
vertigo
sort
element,
of.
but because of that setup, and that
Yeah.
was the thing that we totally overlooked. And looking back now at that the biggest takeaway of learning from that whole experience was just how powerful all the other sensory stuff was.
To support what the visuals that you've gone to such great lengths. Great. Wow. Okay, I'm not quite sure who's next, but let's just see. Oh yeah. Okay, so it's Yoni. You are next.
1981. My mom. Yeah.
Why don't you talk about, because you've introduced yourself to everyone, but I love that story about that you were a rock star, right? Did you tell them that?
I did.
You did. Okay. Did you tell them about
I've
the
used
blinking,
all the good
the
stuff.
blinking ear?
Said that.
Oh, God damn it!
You were here.
Yeah, I know I wasn't here. So,
No,
what could you add about the audience?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think I can talk about what I'm actually doing because I thought about it afterwards, after the previous panel, that I didn't say anything about what we're currently really doing. So I didn't say it before, but my company is called Echo, and it's I did say that it came out from that interactive music video we've done in Israel, and it evolved into, in the beginning, a lot of music videos. Bob Dylan, Coldplay, Jeff Buckley that is here upstairs. Not Jeff, but the video. All taking advantage, and I think also because we were musicians, we were interested in the ability to change not just the video but the audio, and dynamically, and it became a technological thing of how can we change a stream that comes to a user on the fly in any moment. It has its applications to VR as well, but looking at this for a long time, and being a kid, I said it a little before that I was a pretty geeky kid, playing a lot of D&D, really into this idea of, our life is short, I want to live as many lives as I can, or experience as many things, and those kind of, imagination-based things were a great way for it, and in general, the more the technology allows for a more immersive experience, it's better. The core is still the story. And when we started this, and we talked a lot about interactive storytelling, a lot of people told me, boat goes down every time. People have to say, told me, I go to the movie, I wanna be laid back, and I want the director to tell me the story. I don't wanna. And it was always weird to me because I do want a director to
make choices.
to create a world for me to enjoy, but I don't necessarily want him to tell me one story. But as I went through it and I did look into the subject, first of all, if you do look back enough, then back in history enough, then storytelling in its base, like people like to say, is that the campfire, around the campfire. Before there was recorded stories, recorded even in a book, people would dynamically change the story depending on who's in front of them. So, one of the best, as a Jew, one of the best examples is I don't know if you know this thing in Passover, the Jews tell the Haggadah, which is the story of how we were slaves in Egypt, and it's been passing generation to generation, and each family has the way that story is being told. I'm guessing the equivalent with Santa would be, each family makes the story whatever will be the right fit for the audience in this specific thing, is kids. As technology evolved, we were able to suddenly tell stories to more people at once, but on one hand, which is amazing. On the other hand, the audience became bigger, but it became the same person. Like the story that in theater, you still have the dynamics. If the audience is not laughing, the actors will try hard, or something will happen. And now, in every one of those mediums, if you still, even in VR, you do create that thing, you're still, inventing one thing for people to experience. And what's really interesting to us is not the ability to change the story, to say, sometimes people, when we show what we're doing, they say oh my God, so we can do Titanic, but you'll decide if the boat goes. It's no, the boat goes down every time.
Vassiliki, hi. Hi, welcome. You get to talk. So I'll have you talk a little bit about yourself, but you're coming from the documentary world. You've just made this huge splash into the game world. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. My partner and I, we started a studio called Ink Stories 10 years ago. I came from the documentary film background, where I was also trained as a visual anthropologist. And my partner, he came from the game and film world, where he was a cinematic director on a lot of the early Rockstar games, Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, San Andreas, all the way to Alan Wake and Resident Evil. And so together, we always had this great inspiration of how can we merge the two? How can we make games bring the interactivity, the entertainment factor of games, and bring real meaningful stories from real events and real people from diverse backgrounds for global audiences. And so that was really the inspiration of making our game, which we released this year, 1979 Revolution, which is a branching narrative game, and it puts audiences in the shoes of an 18-year-old photojournalist in Iran, as an Iranian, to navigate the social unrest. And so this was, very exciting for us, this possibility of sort of redefining and reframing these historical events based on this living history. And we approached it really as a documentary in the amount of research and the scholars that we were collaborating with. And it's been very important for us to bring a lot of integrity to the work and ethical integrity, but then also create something that's very entertaining and compelling and available to wide audiences. And so taking that pipeline, we've also been very excited about working across platform. And so we've also been creating a slate of VR projects which are similar in that they're designed for global audiences and really mining from our shared collective stories as humanity and sort of piecing those together and allowing people to interact with them.
So you were a DP to a documentary. Did you take that role on when you were developing this game in terms of, or did you let that go to explore other aspects of engaging? Because the DP is really the pipeline to the audience in documentary film. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, we're a really small team, and so everything became collaborative. And I was really spearheading a lot of the look. We were really trying to recreate a 70s cinema look. And so I think I really spearheaded that for 3/4 until I got distracted and had to do something else, and then we switched batons.
So
I have to say just about this because I play this also. It's really great.
Oh, thank you.
I think I told you before, but there's something about specifically, and again, we talked before about removing the borders between games and anything else. There was a game in '91 called Conflict in the Middle East, which I, as a kid, really loved. It was a strategy game, but it was a similar idea in putting you in the shoes of the Israeli prime minister, a day after the previous one was murdered, and this was before the Israeli prime minister really was murdered. And it lets you strategically decide what do you do with the Palestinian problem, what do you do with peace treaties with the countries around you, and each game goes completely different ways. And as a kid, for me, that explained me more about the situation than anything else, because it was fun and interesting. And
you were forced to problem solve? Is that
yeah, if you don't do anything, for example, then Egypt conquers you.
Right.
Or anything else can happen. You're nuked by Iran. But I don't want to make this political.
No.
But
Mike, could you sit over here?
but it was it was this. I had a lot of deja vu when I played that thing, because that idea of bringing something that is enjoyable it's just like seeing a good movie about a specific time. But that is one of the places where if you're put in the story, I think especially for younger people, the ability to stay attentive grows by far. And it's an amazing way to learn about things that otherwise you would say, like, I prefer to go to Instagram.
So I'm interested in this, immediately, we've heard it today, there's sort of the spectrum of audience that's touched upon. So it's like, usually the passive consumer is sort of poo-pooed in a way, that's a technical term. And then there's, active participant on the other side of the spectrum. When you guys are thinking about what you're creating, are you imagining an audience in a fixed state? So are you creating for the audience that's an active participant consistently, or does the audience's role fluctuate as you're telling a story?
It's funny.
I'm going to throw that out to the group.
In creating 1979, it was, silence is always an option. So you can be passive. There are places where you cannot progress if you're completely passive. What's interesting is in our VR project that we've been working on right now called Blindfold, quite often just in our testing, and it's exploration, it's always sort of finding that balance of where does the story live if the audience is super passive, where does the story live if the audience is very active. And it's been so interesting, even in just testing our latest VR piece, people who have made a number of films who are not quite that familiar with VR, so often they're just sitting there and passively engaging with the piece and not even necessarily making choices, because in the experience you can make choices, but they're not even moving around so much. So I think that's, in crafting it, we're trying to keep mindful of both of these and really define what the parameters are and where the story lives according to that spectrum of interactivity.
I think there's a big problem with video-based VR for a lot of different reasons, but the biggest one is that, first of all, most of 360 video VR now, you talked about positioning and things like that, can't take advantage of that technologically right now. So, continuing what's happening in gaming, if anybody tried the Eagle game, for example, upstairs, when you do like this, the whole world moves like this, which makes it real. In video, you do like this, the video is stuck, and like you're right away, you understand this is not happening. And the magic, just like you talked about the context, I really really understood it. If you're able to create all that context and add some wind and do that things, the audience is already sold, especially with an IP and things like that. But otherwise, VR in video, I think, is in a dangerous moment of taking advantage of the hype from gaming, where you are really in the place. It's not gaming, it's CGI-based stuff where they can really place you and position you in another space, which is the magic of being somewhere. Right. And video is also mostly not interactive in VR, even though people call it interactive because you can move your head, which I have a problem with it because, for example, if I was now in a VR experience and I would look here all the time, that would have been so boring. Mm-hmm. And it's true to everything, almost everything in your life, besides if somebody is coming to murder you from the back. Right. And that's what you see. That's what you see generally in VR experiences. They're trying to make in video VR experiences, they're trying to position you in places where maybe something interesting is happening behind. But if anyone tried, for example, the Paul McCartney, then I always look back because I want to see what did they do. Yeah. And there's always a wall or something that doesn't that is not interesting. So suddenly the technology was used because they could and not because they should. And a lot of the interesting things for us then is, the idea of the places where I do feel it works is in documentary stuff, because if you think about it, the one place where you do want to be a fly on the wall is where something's really interesting happening and you don't want to interfere with it, if you do just want to watch. But it does feel a lot of times like being a fly on the wall that can't fly, because you talked about being passive or active. Yeah. Because if you'll notice, almost all VR video-based things either put you in an investigation, so you're sitting and that will make sense, or you're on something that drives. Everything is that thing because it's much, much more obvious that you're not there. And it's, in the end, in 2007, an Israeli guy showed me a 360 video he did with will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas. And it was holding your phone. It was a 360 video. Yeah. And it wasn't that successful, but today, a lot of those stuff is 360 video put right in front of your eyes. It's not stereoscopic.
Right.
It doesn't move when you do anything like that. So there's a danger in this to like, being hyped outside of proportions. But in the end, just being a 360 video, just for the sake of being a 360 video, for me, is like sometimes even can be.
And you're working in VR now too, right?
Yes, but so when we were working in
Yeah.
VR, on purpose, we, for example, said we are, like it's in general about distribution in VR. We said, I said I don't care about distribution in VR because right now to do it well in video, I want to use every trick we can to get you in that context and in that feeling to like be perfect.
So not scaling up sort of like the choices that you've made where you're really containing the environment so that you can control the audience.
No, so a little like that. Yeah. So he did it in CGI and was able to take advantage of everything that was available then.
Yeah.
So we did it. It doesn't work on. You need an HTC Vive with a really powerful machine to play it, even though it's video, which usually isn't that thing. And the idea there is that you're recreating. A thought of a woman played by Emily Mortimer, so also the performance has to be good, and we chose someone that is famous on television, but was also a theater actress, because in VR, when you see the feet of the person, when you're not supposed to see them, it's weird. You need to be, the whole acting looks a little different. And the idea is that like, you're her memory, and if you look at the door, she says, I think they were running through the door, and you look at the stairs, and they said, no, they were definitely going into the stairs. So like, there's some kind of reason for you to look at stuff, and something that puts you in the shoes of an active participant in that situation that in video you can't do. But that meant that we made choices that we cannot spread it, we cannot distribute it easily or at all. Right. People will need to come to our setting where we've put it. We can make sure to put them in the context. And in video in general, I feel we're far away from really being able to do. I mean, right now there's a lot of novelty to it, but I think to really make something that would work, that we won't be like next year saying, yeah.
But this just gives you the room to play with that and see how the audience is engaging with it.
Yeah, there's right now so much money around VR
Right.
that there is a time now to experiment, which I think is great.
It's funny that you bring up the live action video. I was thinking about a comment that Monica made in the earlier panel where she's saying the opportunity lies not in just creating reality in virtual, but looking at these sort of notes in reality and amplifying them up in the virtual and expanding on them. And that really made me think about both of you, because both of you are you're making creative choices in terms of pulling from what our perceived reality is, right, Bo? Yes. And so, in Mike's case, you're making a conscious choice to use physical world. Like, you're not recreating everything, right? You're really playing up, like, heat, wind, what they touch. And then, Vassiliki, you have chosen to take a historical piece and put it into this gaming mechanics. What does that afford the audience, do you think? What type of experience are you building for them by including not just the technology, but sort of elements of realism, I guess you would call it?
I think on one hand, just choosing a certain technology, you're immediately signaling to a certain audience that you want to convey this story to them, and that's an aside, but that's always important for us. This democratization of technology, and also designing for cross-platform, and having our content available all the way down to the cardboard. But I think there's so many choices to be made when you're particularly when you're tapping into these real stories that actually took place, in that you're interpreting it. I mean, just as you're creating a film or writing a book or whatever medium you're using. And so I mean, it's funny, even just in Blindfold, we originally started off in creating, it's in this interrogation room, and how hyper real do we want to create this experience, or how interpretive do we want to be, and really pull some of the storytelling devices into the abstraction, and really what's more important, giving the big truth or the little truth, giving the impression of this experience at the cost of sacrificing some of these smaller truths. And I think that's ultimately, particularly in VR, what we found most effective.
Because you kind of run the risk also of, like, if you include what they know of the real world and it doesn't meet their expectations, you kind of run the risk of losing them. Have you found, like, what have you been dealing with in terms of building out your project?
Just something we learned very early on, we found it really odd with some of the criticism we got with some projects where, oh, well, there's no story, it's just an experience. We're like, well, it's that was when we were getting closer to this feeling that it's not a medium, because mediums imply selfish artists, and director will slave over a 16:9 square, and every aspect of the color vignette to the tempo of the editing, everything, it's absolute selfishness with an open-ended interpretation for the audience. Whereas the more you play around in VR and try and force all the paradigms from every other medium into it, the more you realize it just doesn't kind of work. Sure, first-person shooters, it's fun, you're ducking around and stuff, that translates. Documentary works, but it only works because of voiceover. If you took the voiceover out, you'd be as confused as anyone else. So omnipresent voice immediately breaks the feeling of, like you say, it's fly on the wall, you're not really there. But that still feels like you've got this the greatest, most transformative piece of technology we've ever come across. And we're all obsessed with making games and films in it. It seems like weird. So we were aware pretty early on that the sort of the more experience-based things we were doing, we would always just pull people in off the street, make them do it and observe, and that it was never about us. It was never us selfishly saying, they're going to love this is going to work, getting far too further down with the build for then the audience to do it and realise that it was rubbish or it didn't make sense. So this constant iteration and feedback loop of public virgins coming in and doing these things, and then just observing what they're really taking joy from. Because the best thing ever is just people coming out the headset with that look on that face of like, holy fuck, what was that? We were always going for that moment. And there was no sort of plan about forcing anything else in there, but how do we embody the holy fuck moment over and over and over again? And then that came to a...
say fuck here.
You can't? Oh, sorry. That came to a head
Zoot.
Year before last at Sundance, where we recreated a 40 square feet space of the Italian Dolomites for a brand. And this was before the Vive existed, so we took a full motion capture rig down, had motion capture markers all over a rift, and as long as we could take an HDMI cable, which was about 35, 40 feet from a central position, so you could fully explore this space. But rather than force a story or create an interface or use controllers or all the things that just make users totally snowblind the minute you put them in there, it's like nothing to understand, just there are the Dolomites. It's a beautiful view, there's a rope bridge, just explore.
So you just built out the world.
We just built the whole thing and then went to insane details around the 1-to-1 ratio of the props. So the rope bridge existed. Every crack in the wood of the rope bridge, if you decided to reach down and feel for it, was replicated in the real world. And the ratio was all spot on and perfect. And the joy of people just reaching out to feel the rope and shaking the rope. And the rope had tracking markers, so the rope would move virtually as you were moving it, even though you couldn't see yourself. People just sort of spending time. There's some people lying down, just like watching this. Obviously, it's all kind of dynamically generated because it was all done in a game engine.
High-end replication, why not just really?
Well, it's this sort of holodeck.
What do you need a virtual thing for?
This holodeck joy that I just think we sometimes get.
But I think that's the point of yours, right? It's
Yeah.
not that
You
the virtual
enhanced it,
reality
too.
couldn't pull it off on its own. You needed to create these sort of
Halfway
merit.
through the rope bridge, admittedly, there's a landslide and the whole bridge collapses. So there's a
Yeah.
bit of there's some sort of trauma in there and excitement as well. But
Yeah.
the thing for us was less about beginning, middle, end, story, narrative, whatever, risk, reward, game mechanics, all the things that you can thrust in there. For us, it was just about, and the thing that dawned on us pretty early about making stuff that kept people alert, but not in a selfish way of, oh, make a bell ring over here to make sure they face this way when this happens, seems like it feels like an abusive relationship. It's just like, that's a really selfish thing to do. It just feels like, leave it alone, film person, just step away, let them find out organically what works for them. But that would give the holy fuck moment, people coming out at the end of that. We've done misdirected walking, so you're not really sure or aware of where you are, but it just feels like, for me, that's where I was getting excited, and that's also where I could see the public getting excited, because it felt very different, and you can get lost in the semantics of what story means and what that word means. I mean, you could say someone had a story-led experience of being on a rope bridge in the Dolomites and finding their way to the top, and
That is a story.
it's a story.
Because I agree with everything you say besides the lack of the story, because you're explaining something that I feel is really important. You know, it's very easy to say and show how historically every time a new medium came in, everybody was trying to replicate what already happened with it. There's the famous, if you look at YouTube on like all the old movies until, you know, the invention of a close shot, like it's all the camera standing in the best seat in the theater, and it's all and it's all 2D in a way, because everybody's like coming into the stage, going out of the stage. They were making filmed theater, or even radio to television. You can see people standing around the microphone doing their radio skits. And for a second, it was amazing because now you can also see them. But a second later, it's actually not better because everything was optimized for an audio story. Or in theater, everything was optimized for theater. It was great under those limitations, but suddenly you're bringing those limitations and just using the gimmick of whatever it is. Yeah. And I think that it's not just VR for me, it's VR and gaming in general has been you know, pinpointed into very specific stuff that doesn't take advantage of the full medium. If it's in a VR window, or if it's on a computer screen or a phone. And it's mostly because I think people are trying to bring in everything they know. They try to bring Hollywood filmmakers or game creators that have, even game creators that's only 25 years, let's say, they already have their school of thought. They think that it has to have score and have people die. The one thing that doesn't ever change, I think, is narrative. And in everything you're saying, even there, the narrative for a person to explore an area and once you made the bridge breakdown, there was a story there. Because story is something's happening, then you've got a story. Yeah, and I think once
it's also kind of like an embedded constraint in a way. Like, because you can't just go into a room and it's pure chaos. It's kind of like sort of what happens right now.
Exactly. It's the best story ever is like when you go, just like what you try to recreate there, when I landed in Montreal in the airport, I don't know anything anywhere. I need to find will they accept my US dollars in the taxi? It's all, you know, it's all a story that's happening. Mostly not interesting one, but still a story. But the ability to recreate that in either virtual reality or any other format, from a book like what Charlie showed before that has more depth to it, to a full 360 immersive VR stereoscopic experience has not yet been tapped to. In gaming, it all went into mostly shooting and death. And you know, there's tons of genres and themes and things that, and this is why I like 1979, that are so seldomly touched on in this kind of industries. Even if you look at this, the first one you did that an IP came, I'm guessing, to you, it was Game of Thrones, fantasy, where it's comfortable to think about those things. Like, I remember even as a kid playing Dungeons and Dragons, really wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons without the dragons and the dungeons, but with like freaks and geeks in school, you know what I mean? Like, it's the same stories, by the way. You fight bullies, or you get the girl, or whatever it is. It's the same thing in the end. Instead of a princess, it can be. And those themes that are never touched in those worlds. Like, I'd love to see a VR experience of Mad Men. You know what I mean? It's
navigating social
like
relationships.
Something where the story is king.
Right.
And once in a while, when you see something that does that, giving you choices inside, it's not based on a real story. Just like Mad Men, it's not based on a real story, but it is based on a real time and setting and rules of the time. You know, like when you watch the first episode, I just watched it all again. Yeah. They smoke into the babies' faces, and you're like, you can't believe it, right?
The kids to make the drinks.
Exactly, and it's an amazing way to tell that story of that era. So that's the same thing. You don't need to place it in the same hands, but you basing it on real stuff makes it amazing.
We're going to jump to questions, but I want to ask you quickly, these guys have talked about observing the audience. Have you had a chance to observe an audience playing with some of your VR development? And what do you get excited about?
Not just VR. This was like, I like him really because of what he said there.
Yeah.
Because usually people come in, they have a vision, which you need, and then they say, I know what to do, and they do it, and it's really crap in the end, and it's too late. And especially in industries like that I think have limited time where we can all experiment until the money makers will find out what makes money and will, just focus on that. The most important thing is to understand we know nothing and being able to make that, it's like in software development, you call it agile, which instead of how they used to do it, where you developed like every 6 months a new version came out, now either every week or every day the version comes out, and you're able to, you do it in much shorter. And in this kind of things, this is where we bring in, I think, what we've learned in the last 100 years to make the time it took to move from like theater to cinema, for example, it can be a much shorter transition phase where we discover many more things on how to leverage this. For that, we need that short feedback loop. And it's sometimes really hard because it's really scary to show something to someone because you already like it or don't like it, and suddenly they surprise you. They usually do, because unlike, again, television or movies or even regular games that you know to expect what people will feel, here you don't actually know. And when you're entangled in the creation, there's no way to separate yourself from the creation and be able to.
You can't be objective at
Yeah,
all.
it's like-
you're
it's
you're
like-
instinctively looking
It's like
in the
they
right
don't
way.
let the doctor, operate on his son. You need to bring someone to be a third party.
Okay, great. But this has been fantastic. I hope to see you guys next year. We can see where you're at. You've convinced the village to watch your stuff. Yeah.